Hey folks, welcome to Moonshift Audio. My name's Jack. I'm a mix engineer and producer based in Bristol, UK. I put out a new video every week, so please do like and subscribe. This week I've got a bit of an unusual one for you. I'm going to look at saturation and how gain staging and driving into distortions by different amounts can result in some quite big changes in tone. I'm going to look at one example where we use compression to avoid these changes in tone, and another example where we actively lean into these tonal changes for creative effect. These principles are really fundamental to so much sound design and mixing. I really hope this video will get you thinking about how important signal paths are in your own projects. If you'd like to work with me as a producer or mix engineer, or if you'd like some support with one of your own tracks, you can get in touch at moonshiftaudio.com. But for now, let's jump into Cubase. Okay, so here we are. Alright, so here we are in Cubase, and for the first half of this tutorial I'm going to be looking at a vocal, and this is quite an aggressive kind of pop, maybe slightly rocky kind of vocal, but I can see this going over a drum and bass beat as well.
Clear my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part, so I'm gonna burn my throat
And what I want to look at is what happens when we put some heavy saturation, you could call it distortion, on this. And so I've just got good old decapitator here and put a little bit of drive on.
burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part, so I'm gonna burn my
So yeah, that does rough that up quite nicely. But what I'm hearing is that the loudest sections, the peaks, particularly this sections towards the end of the phrase here, are kind of getting more saturated than the rest. So let's just play that again and keep an ear across when the needle goes into the red.
burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part.
And sure, that can be a good sound. Like, there are definitely times when you might want that kind of edginess. I know certainly like really old school recordings, if you're going for a really vintage sound, you get sometimes some quite kind of harsh sort of like tape or tube distortion that only affects it when the singer really opens up. But if you're going for more of a sort of consistent effect, then the order in which you put your plugins can make a really big difference. So what I've done here is I've got the exact same vocal, just going to turn off decap, and I've compressed it quite heavily, and these are both normalized to neg4 dB, these two audio files, so they have the same exact peak level, but as you can see, this version is much more consistent in volume.
Burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part,
And if we now throw that decapitator on here,
so I'm gonna burn my throat and
this version is much louder overall, although the peaks are the same, so we can probably pull back the drive slightly.
race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part, so I'm gonna burn my throat and race my heart.
And what we get there is a much more consistent amount of distortion across every phrase, every syllable of that vocal.
Didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part, so I'm gonna burn my throat.
So you get that kind of attitude, that nice saturated drive across the whole performance, not just the peaks. Let's listen to the uncompressed version again.
Burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part, so I'm gonna burn my throat and
Maybe if I
race
just boost
my
this up a bit.
heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part, so I'm gonna
And here's the compressed.
burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I am not your downfall. I just might have played a part.
So what we're effectively doing here is we're actually using gain staging as a creative tool. You could throw it through the decapitator and then compress it. That would be absolutely fine. But the order in which you do these processes does affect the overall sound, and it's something that's worth considering. And so now I'm going to look at another example, which is quite radically different, but the same principle applies. And what we've got now is a kind of tech housey kind of groove. I've just got a top loop and a kick loop from Spice, and I have drawn a very, very simple bass line. But what you will see is that I've got some velocity modulation going on. So it sounds like this. Now, if we have a look at this patch, it is literally just a saw wave, right? I'm not trying to get fancy here. In fact, I think the simpler I keep it, the better to demonstrate what I'm trying to do. There is a bit of a filter just taking off the top. And I have made it velocity sensitive, yeah? So the notes with a higher velocity do come out louder, and we can see that on the meter here. And we're going to make use of that by throwing it into some saturation. So just like we saw before, the harder you drive something into distortion, the louder the signal going into it, the more distorted it gets. And oftentimes more distortion results in a kind of change in tone. So I've got this saturation knob. This is the free plugin from Softube. I turn that up. The knob still doesn't turn. Don't know when they're going to fix that. You can see that activating more on those louder notes. And it's worth remembering that distortion also compresses. Naturally, if you slam something through a tube or any kind of distortion circuit, it's always going to sort of squash everything down. And you can start to hear perhaps if we look at this meter here, you can see that the difference between the quieter and the louder notes becomes much smaller. And at this point, actually there's very little difference in volume. We're slamming it so hard into this distortion that the quiet notes and the loud notes all come out the same volume. And what you're left with is a change in tone. And this starts to get really interesting if we start to layer up more than one stage of distortion. So this first stage of saturation or distortion is giving us some of that lovely fuzz. It's giving us a bit of tone change, and it's also making the signal more consistent. So if we now turn on another distortion, in this case I've got an instance of trash, so we're going through the soft tube and then straight out of that into this distortion. Here's what we get. Whereas without that initial stage of saturation, it starts to get really, really rough, which I love about chaining stages of distortion like this. But also, it's really important to consider that the compression effects of that first distortion are massively going to influence what kind of effect that second distortion has on the sound. If we were to swap these the other way around so that the trash now comes before the soft tube, the results are similar, but the tone changes. Now I'm just going to unsolo this. And so what we're really getting out of this is by using changes in volume that I've programmed using the velocity, we're getting changes in tone because we're driving harder into our distortion chain, which is the exact opposite of what we were doing a minute ago with the vocal, where we were using a compressor to avoid changes in tone from the distortion by leveling everything out before it arrived at that distortion. And I think this is a great example of how common principles, in this case gain staging and signal paths, come together across all aspects of mixing and music production. You might never encounter those two sounds in the same track. You might never use those same processors in the same production, but they are all great examples of the same fundamental principles at work. And if you can get your head around that kind of stuff and hold it in your head, then the way that you produce and the way that you mix is going to benefit as a result. That's it for this week, but please do like and subscribe for more tips, tricks, resources and downloads from me at Moonshift Audio. Till next time.